Vice President Harris.
All right.
Here we go, baby.
Madam Vice
Reaction
President, thank you
time.
for the time.
Thank you. It's good to be with you, Brett.
Voters tell pollsters all over the
Nervous.
country and here in Pennsylvania that immigration is one of the key
Thanks again, Benny Johnson. Just wanted to say that real
issues
fast.
that they're looking at this election, and specifically the influx of illegal immigrants from more than 150 countries. How many illegal immigrants would you estimate your administration has released into the country over the last 3.5 years?
Well, I'm glad you raised the issue of
8
immigration
million?
because I agree with you.
Maybe more.
It is a topic of
My
discussion
brother-in-law
that
is a
people
border
want
patrol
to
agent. He
rightly
says quite a
have.
bit. They only catch
And
about 30%.
You know what I'm going to talk about.
Yeah, but
right
do you
now,
just a
which is-
number? Do you
but-
think it's 1
Gonna
million,
guess a
3
lot.
million?
Brett, let's just get to the point. Okay, the point is that we have a broken immigration system that needs to be repaired.
So your
And-
Homeland Security Secretary said that
Well, no,
85%
but
of
I'm not finished.
apprehensions.
I'm not finished.
Oh,
we have,
this is-
we have
It's a
an
rough
immigration
estimate of
I can't believe
6
she
million
did
people
this.
have
That
been
needs to be-
released into the country. And let me just finish. I'll get to the question, I promise you.
I was beginning to answer.
And when you came into office, your administration
Ooh.
immediately reversed a number
Oh.
of Trump border policies. Most significantly, the policy that required illegal immigrants to be detained through deportation, either in the U.S. or in Mexico. And you switched that policy. They were released from custody awaiting trial. So instead, included in those were a large number of single men, adult men, who went on to commit heinous crimes.
It's always,
So,
it's always
Looking
adult
back,
men.
you regret the decision to terminate Remain
families
in
come?
Mexico at the beginning of your administration.
At the beginning of our administration, within practically hours of taking the oath, the first bill that we offered Congress, before we worked on infrastructure, before the Inflation Reduction Act, before the Chips and Science Act, before the bipartisan Safer Communities Act, the first bill, practically within hours of taking the oath,
So her answer
was
is
a
no.
bill to fix our immigration system.
Yes, ma'am. It was called
And-
the
My
U.S.
answer is no.
Citizenship Act of 2021. It was essentially
so,
a
but
pathway to
may I
citizenship for
please
the...
finish?
Yes,
May
ma'am.
I
US make
finish, may I
everyone a
finish
citizen.
responding,
Oh,
please?
But this,
But you have to let me finish,
you had the
please.
White House and the House and the Senate,
I'm
and
in
they
the
didn't
middle
bring
of
up that bill.
responding to the point you're raising,
Okay.
and I'd like
Oh,
to
dear.
finish.
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, this is great.
We recognized from day one that, to the point of this being your first question, it is a priority for us as a nation and for the American people. And our focus has been on fixing a problem. And from day one, then, we have done a number of things,
Yes.
including to address
Fixing
our
it.
asylum system and put more resources, getting more judges, what we needed to do to tighten up penalties and increase penalties for illegal crossings, what we
Really?
needed to do to deal with points of entry between border entry points. That's the work we did, and we worked
Where the wall
on
should be.
supporting what was a
entry
bipartisan
points?
effort, including some of the most conservative members of the United States Congress, to actually strengthen the border. That border bill would have put 1,500
Ah,
more
yes,
border
Liz
agents
Cheney.
at the border, which is
Most
why I
conservative
believe the
person I
Border
know.
Patrol agents supported the bill. It would have allowed us to stem the flow of fentanyl coming into the United States, which is a scourge affecting people of every background, every geographic location in our country, killing people. It would have allowed us to put more resources into prosecuting transnational
Vance
criminal
could have done a
organizations,
much better
which
job
I
pushing
have done
Walt's
Yes,
on
ma'am.
as the Attorney General, former Attorney General of a
think-
border state.
Madam Vice President, a couple of things.
Prosecuted trafficking of drugs,
Six-
guns, and human beings. And
six
Donald Trump,
Democrats-
but let me just finish.
6
And
Democrats
Donald
voted
Trump
against that bill.
learned about that bill and told them to kill it because he preferred to run on a problem
Nope.
instead of fixing
I'm
a
tired of this
problem. And in
bullshit.
this
I'm tired of that.
election,
Tired of that.
this is rightly a
They keep saying
discussion
that crap.
that the American people want
There's
to
a real reason
have.
why.
And what they want are
legitimate
solutions,
reason.
and they want a president of the United States who's not playing political games with the issue,
I hear you.
but actually is focused on fixing
6
it.
Democrats voted against that bill. It would have allowed 1.8 million illegal immigrants into the country a year. A lot of conservatives had
On
a
top of
problem
the
with it.
million we
These
let
are the 6
in legally.
Democrats. But more
Over
importantly, back to the original
million.
premise. Jocelyn Nungary, Rachel Morin, Laken Riley, they are young women who were brutally assaulted and killed by some of the men who were released at the beginning of the administration, well before a negotiated bipartisan bill. Former President Clinton actually referred to Laken Riley Sunday campaigning for you in Georgia, saying if those men had been properly vetted, Laken Riley probably would not have been killed. So if it wouldn't have happened, this is well before any negotiation. This is well before Donald Trump got involved in the politics. This is a specific policy decision by your administration to release these men into the country. So what I'm saying to you, do you owe
Brett,
those families an apology?
Let me just say, first of all, those are tragic cases. There's no question about that.
This is her long form.
There's no question
this
about
is a
that.
no. Watch.
And I can't imagine the pain
It's
that the
Donald Trump's
families of those victims have experienced for a loss that should not have occurred. So that is true. It is also true that if a border security had actually been passed 9 months ago, it would be 9 months
They had
that
the
we would
Senate,
have
the
had
House,
more border agents
and
at the border,
freaking White
more
House
support
all at
for the folks who are
once,
working
and they
around
couldn't
the
get it
clock,
passed.
trying to
So-
hold it all together
Madam Vice President.
to ensure that no future harm would occur. And this election in 20 days will determine whether we have a president of the United States who
20
actually cares more about fixing a problem, even if it is not to their political advantage in an election, because there was a solution, Brett.
No.
Madam Vice President,
No,
it
there
was a
wasn't.
policy decision in the early part of your administration. I will let one of the mothers talk about it. Take a listen.
Because of the Biden-Harris administration open border policies catch and release, they were enrolled in the Alternatives to Detention program. This meant that they were released into the United States. It was not even a full 3 weeks later that they would take my daughter, Jocelyn Nungare's life. I believe the Biden-Harris administration open border policies are responsible for the death of my daughter.
That's the early days. So do you owe them an apology is what
I
I'm
will
saying.
tell you that I am so sorry for her loss. I'm so sorry for her loss,
Sure.
sincerely.
Sure you are.
But let's talk about what is happening right now with an individual who does not want to participate in solutions.
It's your fault.
About that as well.
But do you
Brett,
want to answer
in all
Betty?
fairness, I told you, I feel awful for what she and her family have experienced.
It's your fault.
You said repeatedly that the border was secure.
Yeah, it's her fault,
When
that's
in
for
your
sure.
mind did it start becoming a crisis?
I think we've had a broken immigration system transcending, by the way, Donald Trump's administration even before. Let's all be honest about that.
Oh.
I have no pride in saying that this is a perfect immigration system. I've been clear, I think we all are, that it needs to be fixed. We need more. I was just down at the border talking with border agents, and they will tell you, and I'm sure you probably, I know you investigate and you are a serious journalist. They will tell you, we need more judges. We need to process those cases faster. We need the support for those
judges.
cases that should be
Yeah,
prosecuted.
so we could
They need
Yeah,
more
process
resources,
more
and
people
Congress
so we can
ultimately
let
is the
more people
only
in.
place
Yeah,
that
let's
that's
do
going to
that.
get
Let's do
fixed,
that.
Brett.
Well,
That's
why
how
not
the
limit
system
them
works.
coming
That's
in?
the premise of this
That's-
question.
but
There were
that's how the
90
system
plus
works.
executive orders that were rescinded in the first days. Many of those were Trump border policies. I'm not going to stay here because there's other things to talk about, but you frequently talk to the Border Patrol Union for support of that bipartisan bill, and they did. They supported it. But they also just endorsed Donald Trump and said, you've been, quote, a failure with border security. Why do you think they said that?
I think they're frustrated, and I get it. They want support. They want support, and that's what that border security bill would have done. These guys down at the border, these men and women, they're working hard. They're working around the
You know,
clock.
I'll have to ask my
I get it.
brother-in-law about the
There's a
border
lot of people that
support.
look back at what you said in 2019 when you first ran for president. And there have been changes, and you've talked about some of them. When it comes to immigration, you supported allowing immigrants
She's a
in the
freaking
country
nut.
illegally to apply for driver's license, to qualify for free tuition at universities, to be enrolled in free health care. Do you still support those things?
Listen, that was 5 years ago, and I'm very clear that I will follow the law. I have made that statement over and over again, and as Vice President of the United States, that's exactly what I've done, not to mention before.
So that's
You-
yes.
If that's
Yeah,
the
that's
case,
yes.
you chose
She
a running mate,
does.
Tim Walz, who governor of Minnesota, who signed those very things into state law. So do you support that?
We are very clear, and I am very clear, as is Tim Walz,
Very clear.
that we must support and enforce federal law, and that is exactly what we will do.
Yeah, if you
So
change federal law,
decriminalizing
then
border
it's
crossings, like you said in 2019.
yeah, then they'll follow
I
it.
do not believe in decriminalizing border crossings, and I've not done that as vice president. I will not do that as president.
So these are evolutions that you've had.
No, but let's be very clear. I'm the only person who's running for president who has prosecuted transnational criminal organizations, from the Sinaloa cartel to the Guadalajara cartel to people who have trafficked in guns, drugs, and human beings. I have spent a significant part of my career going after people who present a threat to the safety of the American people and cross our border with the intent of doing us harm and cross our border illegally. And I will do that work as vice president. I take that work quite seriously.
This is a time when voters, especially here in Pennsylvania, are inundated with commercials and ads. They just want it to stop because it's every commercial. But many of them add noise, but a few of them seem to break through. This particular one from the Trump campaign has gotten a lot of attention.
Kamala supports taxpayer-funded sex changes for prisoners.
Surgery.
For prisoners.
For prisoners. Every transgender inmate in the prison system would have access.
Yeah, then send them to a female
Are
prison.
you still in support of using taxpayer dollars to help prison inmates or detained illegal aliens to transition to another gender?
I will follow the law, and it's a law that Donald Trump actually followed. You're probably familiar with, now it's a public report, that under Donald Trump's administration, these surgeries were available on a medical necessity basis.
Let's keep it play again. Let's keep it
people
tally.
in the federal prison
Was that
system.
like 2 or 3 now?
And I think,
or?
frankly,
I've
that
lost count.
ad
How
from
many
the
times
Trump
will she
campaign is a
blame
little
Donald
bit
Trump?
of like throwing, stones when you're living in a
We'll
glass
start over.
house.
The Trump aides say that
This is
he
one.
never
I
advocated
think
for
it
that
might be
prison
3, but
policy and
we'll
no
say
gender
1.
transition
Well,
surgeries
you know what? You got to
happened
take
during
responsible for what
his
happened in your
presidency.
administration.
Yeah, no surgeries happened in his presidency.
It's in
So
black and white.
would you still advocate for using taxpayer dollars for gender reassessment
I will
surgeries?
follow the law, just as I
But you have a
think
say
Donald
in
Trump
it.
would say he did.
You would have a say as president.
Like I said, I think he spent $20 million on those ads, trying to create a sense of fear in the voters because he actually has no plan in this election that is about focusing on the needs of the American people. Whereas, at $20 million on that ad, on an issue that, as it relates to the biggest issues that affect the American people, it's really quite remote. And again, his policy was no different. Look at where we are,
shows how
though.
deranged
They
he
On
show
was.
plans for the American
We'll move
people,
on.
I'm offering a plan to deal with affordable housing. I'm offering a plan to deal with what we need to do to strengthen small businesses, which are the backbone of America's economy. I am offering a plan that is about taking care of young parents and giving them the support they need. My plans for the economy will strengthen the economy, as have been reviewed by 16 Nobel laureates, Goldman Sachs, Moody's, and recently the Wall Street Journal, which have all studied our plans and have indicated my plans for our economy would strengthen our economy, his would make them weaker,
Why do you
would
think more
ignite
people say-
inflation and invite a recession by the middle of next year. Those are the facts.
Why do you think more people say they trust him on the economy than they trust you?
I think that when you look at an analysis of our plans for what we would do as President of the United States, it has been clear to those who study and understand how economic policy works that moving forward, because I do believe the American people are ready to turn the page on the divisiveness and the type of rhetoric that has come out of Donald Trump. People are ready to chart a new way forward, and they want a president who has a plan for the future and a plan that is sound and will strengthen our country. My plan for the economy does exactly that. His plan would be, again, to give tax cuts to billionaires and the biggest corporations in our country and blow up our deficit.
It's interesting you said turn the page, Madam Vice President. You were asked on two
don't
different
know. I already
shows last
lost
week
count.
what, if anything, you would
This
do
game is gonna be too
differently
hard
than
to keep
President
track of.
Biden. Here's what you said.
Would you have done something differently than President Biden during the past 4 years?
There is not a thing that comes to mind in terms of, and I've been a part of most of the decisions that have had impact.
Under a Harris administration, what would the major changes be and what would stay the same?
Sure. Well, I mean, I'm obviously not Joe Biden.
I know.
And so that would be one change in terms of, but also I think it's important to say with, 28 days to go, I'm not Donald Trump.
So you're not Joe
Seems like she
Biden, you're not
has.
Donald Trump, but nothing
Good for
comes
her.
to mind that you would do differently?
Let me be very clear. my presidency will not be a continuation of Joe Biden's presidency. And like every new president that comes into office, I will bring my life experiences, my professional experiences, and fresh and new ideas. I represent a new generation of leadership. I, for example, am someone who has not spent the majority of my career in Washington, D.C. I invite ideas, whether it be from the Republicans who are supporting me, who were just on stage with me minutes ago, and the business sector, and others who can contribute to the decisions that I make about, for example, my plan for increasing the supply of housing in America and bringing down the cost of housing, addressing the issue of small businesses, which is about working with the private sector to bring more capital and access to capital to our small business leaders, including my plan for a $25,000 down payment assistance for first-time home buyers and for small businesses, extending the tax deduction from $5,000 to $50,000.
We've heard a lot about those plans in recent days. Your campaign slogan is a new way forward, and it's time to turn the page. You've been vice president for 3.5 years. So what are you turning the page from?
Well, first of all, turning the page from the last decade.
You're turning the page
we've been burdened
in the same
with
fucking
the
book.
kind of rhetoric coming from
You're turning
Donald
the page
Trump
in the
that
same
has been
book.
designed
It's the same
and
story.
implemented
We
to
just had you
divide
for
our country
3+ years.
and have Americans
Biden wasn't the
literally
president.
point
It was
fingers
you.
at each other. Rhetoric and an approach to leadership that suggests that the strength of a leader is based on who you beat down instead of what we all know. The strength of leadership is based on who you lift up. The strength of an American president, which is one who understands that the vast majority of us have more in common than what separates us.
Madam
That
Vice
is
President, more than
turning the page.
70% of people
That is
tell
about
pollsters,
turning the page on rhetoric that people are frankly exhausted of, Brett.
more than
People are
70% of people
exhausted.
tell the country is on the wrong track. They say the country is on the wrong track. If it's on the wrong track, that track follows 3.5 years of you being vice president and President Biden being president.
Same book.
That is what they're
Same
saying.
book.
79%
Turning the page
of
in the
them.
same fucking
Why
book.
are they saying that? If you're turning the page, you've been in office for
Fracking
3.5
book.
years.
Sorry, fracking.
And
what I
Donald
said.
Trump has been running for office.
But you've been the person holding the office.
Come on.
Madam
You
Vice
and I
President.
both know what I'm talking about. You and I both know what I'm talking
I actually
about.
don't. What are you talking about?
What I'm talking about is that over the last decade,
But you're
people
the
have
lever of
become,
power.
but listen, over the last decade, it is clear to me, and certainly the Republicans who are on stage with me, the former chief of staff to the president, Donald Trump, former defense secretaries, national security advisor, and his vice president, one, that he is unfit to serve, that he is unstable, that he is dangerous, and that people are exhausted with someone who professes to be a leader who spends full time demeaning and engaging in personal grievances and it being about him instead of the American people. People are tired of that.
If that's the case, why is half the country supporting him? Why is he beating you in a lot of swing states? Why, if he's as bad as you say, that half of this country is now supporting this person who could be the 47th president of the United States? Why is that happening?
This is an election for president of the United States. It's not supposed to be
by the way,
easy.
has him up by like 17
It's not
or
supposed to
18%
be.
now. Something
It is not
outrageous.
supposed to be a
So
cakewalk
are they misguided,
for
the
anyone.
50%?
Listen,
Are they stupid? What is
God,
it?
I would never say that about the American people. And in fact, if you listen to Donald Trump, if you watch any of his rallies, he's the one who tends to demean and belittle and diminish the American people. He's the one who talks about an enemy within, an enemy within, talking about the American people, suggesting he would turn the American military on the American people.
We asked that question to the former president today. Harris Faulkner had a town hall,
you freaking retard.
and this is how he responded.
I heard about that. They were saying I was like threatening. I'm not threatening anybody. They're the ones doing the threatening. They do phony investigations. I've been investigated more than Alphonse Capone. He was the greatest gangster. No, it's true. No, but think of it. It's called weaponization of government. It's a terrible thing.
So,
Brett, I'm sorry, and with all due respect, that clip was not what he has been saying about the enemy within that he has repeated when he's speaking about the American people. That's not what you just showed.
He was asked.
No,
He's
no,
not
no,
speaking
that's
about the
not what you
American
just showed. In
people.
all
No, no, no.
fairness and
I'm telling
respect
you,
to
that was the
you,
question that we asked him.
you didn't show that,
talking
and
about the
here's the
deep
bottom
state.
line.
You and your
He has
freaking
repeated it
cronies.
many times, and you and I both know that. And you and I both know that he has talked about turning the American military on the American people. He has talked about going after people who are engaged in peaceful protest. He has talked about locking
Mostly
people up
peaceful.
because they disagree with him. This is a democracy. And in a democracy, the President of the United States, in the United States of America, should be willing to be able to handle criticism without saying he'd lock people up for doing it. And this is what is at stake, which is why you have someone like the former chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff saying what Mark Milley has said about Donald Trump being a threat to the United States of America.
He's quoted in the Bob Woodward book that way, yes. Let me ask you this, Madam Vice President.
But
You call
let's not
Donald
diminish
Trump.
the significance
you
of that.
call Donald Trump. He's misguided. You say now
He's unstable. He is unstable, Brett.
He's
not
angry.
well. You say he's
He's
mentally
angry.
not stable.
He's not stable.
Let me ask you this. You told many interviewers that Joe Biden was on his game, that ran around circles on his staff. When did you first notice that President Biden's mental faculties appeared
Thank you.
diminished?
Finally, somebody brought it up.
Joe Biden, I have watched from the Oval Office to the Situation Room, and he has the judgment and the experience to do exactly what he has done in making very important decisions on behalf of the American people.
There were no concerns raised?
Brett, Joe Biden is not on the ballot.
I understand.
Now you know
And
for a
Donald
fact
Trump-
she's
Donald
straight up
Trump
lying.
But you
is-
talked about it.
And Donald Trump
After George
is.
Clooney said
and
within a
if
few
you
minutes of
watch
talking to President
Donald
Biden at a
Trump-
fundraiser that he thought this was not the same
Brett.
Joe Biden that we saw on the debate
Donald
stage.
Trump
even
is
admit
on the
that.
ballot.
I
Why don't you
understand.
admit that?
You
Just-
met with him at least once a week for 3.5 years. You didn't have any concerns?
I think the American people have a concern about Donald Trump, which is why the people who know him best, including leaders of our national security community, have all spoken out. Even people who worked for him in the Oval Office, worked with him in the Situation Room, and have said he is unfit and dangerous and should never be president of the United States again,
she
including
regained
his
her
former
composure. I
vice
guess good
president,
for her,
which
huh?
is why the job was open for him to choose another running mate. So that is a fact. That is a fact.
Madam Vice President, two more things. You were asked on 60 Minutes about the biggest threat that the world faces, that the U.S. faces. This is what you said.
Which foreign country do you consider to be our greatest adversary?
I think there's an obvious
video, by the way. I'm gonna
one
react
in
to that
mind, which is
soon.
Iran. Iran has American blood on their hands. Okay, this attack on Israel, 200 ballistic missiles. What we need to do to ensure that Iran never achieves the ability to be a nuclear power, that is one of my highest priorities.
A number of experts thought you would say China. The FBI director had said that. But you said Iran. If that's the case, what do you say to critics who look at the actions of your administration and say you're not acting like Iran is the #1 threat?
Well, I will tell you most recently, whether it was in April or in October, and then several hours on each occasion, that Iran posed a threat
Sorry, the ring lights.
to Israel.
So, kind of blinking.
I
a lot
was
right
there.
now.
Most recently in the Situation Room, in the most recent attack, working with the heads of our military and doing what America must always do to defend and to support Israel in its requirement to defend itself, and to give American support to be able to allow Israel to have the resources to defend itself against attack, including from Iran and Iran's terrorist proxies in the region.
Right.
And that
But those
is,
proxies were getting
and
funded
my
by Iran.
commitment to that is unyielding and unwavering.
Critics just say that you either relaxed or failed to enforce sanctions on Iran, allowing all of this money to flow into Iran, like billions.
Let's
in
go back to
oil
Donald
profits.
Trump, who pulled out of a deal that would have
I don't know,
actually
20
put
now? 20
here are
times?
the-
Who the
Iran
hell?
in check.
Somebody
The
keeps count?
estimates in
And then
billions.
I want to
during
see it down in
Donald
the
Trump's
comments.
that
How many
go
times has she
administration that
towards
lived
Iran,
in everything
regime.
happening?
that we had an American military base that was attacked,
After
where
saying you need
American
to take
soldiers
accountability for
suffered
things that
traumatic
happened during
brain
your
injuries, and Donald Trump
administration.
dismissed them as headaches. Not to mention
Madam
how
Vice
Donald
President,
Trump has
all of this money
has treated
that
and
has
talked
gone
about
in the
America's
past few
military
years,
and military service people,
critics
calling
say
them
that it goes to
suckers and
Hezbollah,
losers,
Hamas,
has diminished
and
the
Houthis. We're
significance.
talking over each other. I apologize. But you're not.
I would like that we would have a conversation that is grounded in full assessment of the facts, which includes, I think this interview is supposed to be about the choices that your viewers should be presented about this election, and the contrast is important.
Yes, ma'am.
And on the subject of Iran, I am offering what should be an important contrast that is presented for folks to make a
And there
decision
are
that
critics
they
who
feel.
look at what the administration did and say and think differently. Madam Vice President, they're wrapping me very hard here. I hope you got to say what you wanted to say about Donald Trump. There are a lot of things
There's
that
more to say. I have
there
much more
are
to
a
say,
lot of
actually.
things that people want to learn about you and your policies, and
Yes.
that's why we
I
invited
invite
you
everyone to go to KamalaHarris.com, and you will see that I have 80 pages of policies that are quite comprehensive and should be accessible to anyone who would like to read them. And it includes what I intend to do about affordable housing, what I intend to do about small businesses, what I do
And that's why
intend
we
to do to
invited you
strengthen our
here,
economy,
to see where you were in 2019 and where you are
support
now.
America's military and ensure we have the most lethal and best fighting force in the world.
Madam Vice President,
And
they're giving me a hard rap
Well,
here.
I thank you for the time.
I thank you for the time.
It's good to meet you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
To my exclusive interview
Gosh.
with Vice President Harris.
Sorry.
Here we go, baby.
Madam
First of all, first and foremost, absolutely great job on that interview. That is fantastic, and I'm so happy. There was a lot of stuff that he actually called her out on, a lot of bullshit. I do want to just add one little piece at the end. People want to get to know Kamala Harris, but she never says anything about herself other than, I was a middle-class child growing up in blah, 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 blah. Because there's no context. There's no actual substance of her character or who she is. She is a conglomerate willing to be anything that the deep state wants her to be. You know, one day she's Indian, one day she's Asian, one day she's black. She's willing to mold herself into anything possible just to get in there. And that's why she is part of this. She's being pushed as their candidate, even though they never held an actual primary for her. There's no character. There's no substance. I mean, they're already getting her. She's getting caught up for plagiarism in her book that she made that's partial autobiography about her time as a DA. I don't even know what to say. That was awesome, though. I think that Poly Market showed Trump last I checked up by like 17% or something like that, maybe a little higher. Fantastic job, dude. Fantastic job. All right, you deplorables. Take it easy.
Vice President, thank you for the time.